Dr. Saurabh TV, a teacher from Sri Shivaji Vidya Mandir and Junior College, Aun. Students, in the earlier session, we discussed two significant figures of speech, alliteration and repetition. We studied both the figures of speech, alliteration and repetition simultaneously because there is a commonness between alliteration and repetition, though there is a slight difference on the basis of sound and a word. And that is why we discussed both the figures of speech, alliteration and repetition simultaneously. Today also we are going to deal with two figures of speech at the same time. The reason is that there is a commonness as well as a little bit difference between these two figures of speech. The title of these two figures of speech are Simile and Metaphor. Simile and Metaphor are also two very important figures of speech which are mostly used by authors, poets in their writing. I have intentionally taken these two figures of speech at the same time so that I can explain the difference as well as the commonness between simile and metaphor. So there is a definite purpose, there is a definite intention behind using each and every figure of speech in English language. So when the poets, when the authors employ the figures of speech like simile or metaphor, there is a definite purpose behind using the figures of speech like simile and metaphor. So the first reason, the first purpose behind using the figure of speech simile and metaphor is that to make an idea, to make concept or the thought expressed by the poet more interesting in the piece of literature. The second reason behind using simile and metaphor is that the thought or the concept or an idea can be presented or can be comprehended by the readers or the students at a deeper level. So, the figures of speech, simile and metaphors help to comprehend the particular poem or particular line of the poem at a deeper level or extensively. Thirdly, the most important point I would like to discuss here is that as we saw, the repetition of particular sound or a word in alliteration and repetition. So the repetition is the base of alliteration and repetition as we studied in the earlier session. When we come to simile and metaphor, the base of simile and metaphor is the comparison. So comparison is made in both simile as well as in metaphor. So what is compare? It should be studied at a deeper level. So similes and metaphors are understood as the comparison statements. Both similes and metaphors are the comparison statements. So comparison is made between See, I have written two words on the board. Comparison is made between two unlike things or two dissimilar things in the line or in the sentence. So when one thing is compared with another thing, that is called comparison. So we find comparison in both simile and metaphor. So what is the difference between simile and metaphor? One point I have made you clear, that there is comparison in both simile and metaphor. Two different things, two dissimilar things, two unlike things are compared in simile as well as in metaphor. Then what is the difference between simile and metaphor if the comparison is made between two dissimilar things or two unlike things in both the figures of speech? So the difference is that in simile, when two things are compared, the markers of comparison, or we can call them relational indicators like as and like, are used in simile. When two things are being compared in simile, these two things are compared with the help of the relational indicators like or as, and then the comparison is made. For example, the officer wandered as a cloud in the city. So if you look at this sentence, then it will be clear that what is compared and how is compared in the figure of speech simile. So let us look at this sentence. The officer wandered as a cloud in the city. So in this sentence, two different things are being compared. The first thing is the officer, and the second thing with which an officer is compared is a cloud. The officer wandered as a cloud in the city is the best example of the figure of speech simile, because the criteria for the figure of speech simile is there should be two things. These two things should be unlike, different, dissimilar. The officer, and the second thing is a cloud. So these are completely two different things, and these two things are being compared in the sentence with the help of the relational indicators, or we can say markers of comparison like as and like. So in our sentence where we are going to compare the officer with a cloud, we have the marker of comparison as. So with the help of the marker of comparison as, the officer is being compared with a cloud, and therefore this sentence is an example of the figure of speech simile. So I hope that you must have understood what is simile. So let me revise once again. In simile, we have comparison. The comparison is made between two unlike things, two dissimilar things, and this comparison between two unlike things is made with the help of the words like as or like. As we saw in the sentence, the officer wandered as a cloud in the city. So in this way, we have discussed about simile. Now let us come to the second figure of speech, that is metaphor. So in metaphor also there is comparison. The comparison is made between two unlike or two dissimilar things. But there is a slight difference between simile and metaphor. Then what is that slight difference between simile and metaphor? The difference is very easy to understand. As we used the marker of comparison as in the figure of speech simile, it means that the comparison between two dissimilar things in simile is made with the help of the marker or relational indicators like as or like. But in metaphor, we have comparison, of course, but that comparison is made without marker of comparison, without relational indicators like as or like. For example, laughter is the best medicine. I have chosen this sentence as an example of metaphor. So if you look at this sentence, it will be clear that in this sentence, two dissimilar, two unlike things are being compared. The first is laughter and the second one is medicine. So laughter is being compared with medicine but without marker of comparison like or as. So this is where the difference lies between simile and metaphor. In simile, we make use of the relational indicators like as and like. In metaphor, without these words, comparison is made between two different things. That is called metaphor. So let me revise. In simile and metaphor, we have comparison. Two dissimilar, two unlike things are compared to make particular idea, thought more interesting. The idea, thought which is presented in the poem should be comprehended at a deeper level by the readers, by the students, and therefore these figures of speech are used in particular piece of literature. In simile, comparison is made with the help of the markers of comparison like as or like, whereas in metaphor, the comparison is made without the markers of comparison like as and like. So, comparison is the compulsory element in simile as well as in metaphor. Got it? Comparison is the compulsory point, compulsory element, compulsory process, I would like to say, in simile and metaphor. But the markers, the use of markers of comparison like as and like is not compulsory. The use of markers of comparison is compulsory in simile but not in metaphor. In metaphor, the comparison is made without the help of the words like, as and like. Still the comparison is made, and therefore simile differs from comparison in the sense of the use of markers of comparison. Let me also make you clear that in simile we have explicit comparison. In simile we have direct comparison with the help of the words like as and like. In simile we have the overt comparison. We can easily visualize, we can easily see that there is a comparison between two dissimilar things with the help of the words like as and like in simile. But whereas in metaphor, we have implied comparison. In metaphor, we have covert comparison, indirect comparison, hidden comparison, isn't it? Because there is no word like as or like to compare two different things, and therefore sometimes it is also called that simile is the implied comparison. Simile is the explicit comparison, whereas the metaphor is implicit comparison. Sometimes it is also called simile is the overt comparison and metaphor is a covert comparison. So this is how we have discussed the figures of speech, simile and metaphor. These are very easy figures of speech which are employed by most of the poets, authors, writers in their piece of writing or literature. So we have taken these two examples, two non-textual examples to explain the figure of speech, simile and metaphor. So let us take some examples from our poem Song of the Open Road, because when we studied the poem Song of the Open Road, we came across some lines where we have the figure of speech, metaphor. So we are going to discuss these lines from the poem Song of the Open Road. So let us see the slide I have provided in this video where we have these lines from the poem Song of the Open Road. Friends, let us see the slide I have provided where we have the lines of metaphors from the poem Song of the Open Road. So I read the first line. You just look at the slide. A foot and light-hearted I take to the open road. Now this line is an example of metaphor, because in this line the expression open road is compared with a journey of a life. So the poet has made the comparison between the road and a journey of life, and therefore this line is an example of metaphor. Now let us come to the second line in the slide. I read the line. I do not want the constellations any nearer. So this line is also considered to be an example of metaphor, because in this line the expression constellations is compared with the influential group of people. Therefore this line is an also example of metaphor. If you look at this line carefully, the comparison is made between the constellation with the influential a particular group of people. So this is the implied comparison with the help of the expression constellations and the influential group of the people. Now look at the slide and let us come to the third line. I read the line. Still here I carry my old delicious burdens. So in this line the words delicious burdens are compared with the sweet memories in the past. So here the comparison is made between the delicious burden and the sweet memories in the past the poet experienced, and therefore this line is also an example of metaphor. So if you look at these three lines, we find the covert or hidden comparison the poet has made between two different things. In the first line, we have comparison, implied comparison between the open road and a journey of life. In the second line, we have the hidden comparison between the constellation and the influential, a particular group of people. And in the third line, we have the hidden comparison between the delicious burden and the sweet memories of the past the poet experienced. And therefore, these three lines are the examples of metaphor. So this is how we have discussed the figure of speech metaphor in this session. Thank you.